I would like to ask you a question. If you owned a home and someone forcibly broke into your home, and then they decided that they were going to set up shop and that they were going to make the decisions about how your finances were ran, about how your family lived their daily lives, what they could and could not do, would you allow that to continue to happen? Or would you not want to drive out the trespasser? Well, that is exactly what is being voted on right now. Senator Mike Lee, at the time of my recording of this video, is trying to force a vote on the SAVE Act, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. Now, what the SAVE Act does is it requires, by law, that someone prove that they are an American citizen before being eligible to vote. Now, that would seem like common sense, wouldn't it? Well, this bill passed the House yesterday in a vote of 221 to 198 opposed. 5 Democrats joined with the Republicans to get it passed. And now, Senator Mike Lee, at the time of my recording of this video, is trying to force it to be voted on in the Senate. But the Biden administration has already came out and said, were it to pass the Senate, that they would veto it. So that would require that it would go back to the House and that it would have to pass both houses, the House and the Senate, by 2/3 majority of a vote. Now you have to ask yourself, why would Democrats, who seem to be the only ones opposing this, want for foreign nationals to be able to vote in an election? Why would they want illegal immigrants to be able to vote in an election? If they were so concerned about preserving democracy, by the way, we are not a democracy, but if they're so concerned about promoting and preserving the survival of American democracy, as they claim, wouldn't you think that they would be in favor of this bill? Wouldn't you think that they wouldn't want someone who has foreign interest to be able to vote in American elections? To me, this is common sense, especially considering that we have over 10 million illegal immigrants flooding the border right now, and we don't know where they're coming from or what their intent is. See, the Democrats have weaponized illegal immigration. Make no mistake about it. Because for over 3.5 years, the Biden administration has not only kept the border open, but disallowed the state of Texas from securing its own border. I made a video about that, and I will post it in the description of this video. Texas has been trying to secure its own border, but the Biden administration has stood in Texas's way of doing so. That's immoral and unconstitutional. It's wrong. The Biden administration has a moral responsibility and a constitutional obligation to secure the borders of this nation. But yet they refuse to do so, my friends. And now they have come out and they said that they will oppose the SAVE Act, even if it passes the Senate today. So it'll be forced to go back and it'll have to be overridden. But I want you to pay attention to this SAVE Act. I want you to pay attention to who doesn't vote in favor of the SAVE Act. Because I think it is very telling if you don't vote for a common sense bill that requires that you prove that you are an American citizen. I think it is treasonous and traitorous, and it reveals something about your character. I don't think only that you shouldn't be in public office. I think you should also be tried for treason. Because if we can't secure our own elections and have fair elections, then can we really say we have a republic anymore? If we're allowing foreign nationals to come in and vote, to cancel out the vote of the American people. I want you to listen to what Senator Mike Lee had to say on the floor of the Senate today. Pardon this, it's a bit lengthy, it's about 17 minutes, but it's worth every second of the listening. I want you to listen to this because it's very telling about what the Biden administration has come out and opposed right now, and then I want to talk a little bit more about it.
Madam President, one citizen, one vote. Today, this foundational principle is under attack. It's under attack because President Biden refuses to enforce the law. And now we face a direct threat to our entire electoral system. Consider this. Since President Biden's inauguration on January 20th, 2021, over 10 million illegal immigrants have entered the United States. Now, this figure exceeds the populations of 36 states, creating a crisis that has been met with troubling silence and inaction from far too many on the other side of the aisle. With millions of unauthorized people now on U.S. soil, living here in the United States, the potential for election fraud through ineligible voting is not just a hypothetical risk. No, it is a looming reality. With the influx of non-citizens under this administration, even if just a fraction, let's just say something like 1 in 100 were to vote, this could translate to hundreds of thousands of votes, enough to sway our tightly contested elections and potentially alter their outcomes. This is deeply concerning, considering that a recent study showed that non-citizens have ample openings to vote illegally. It found that anywhere from 10 to 27% of non-citizens are registered to vote, and 5 to 13% of non-citizens do actually vote in presidential elections, no less. Across the nation, instances abound where states have inadvertently facilitated this very crisis. From unsolicited voter registration forms being mailed out to non-citizens to driver's licenses issued without adequate checks, practices relying merely on the honesty of illegal aliens have opened up the floodgates to voter fraud. While it's true that it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections, there are no effective systems in place to verify the citizenship of voters. A mere check on a box is all it takes, with little risk of being caught. In short, you're on the honor system with those forms. Federal law even prohibits states from requiring proof of citizenship when registering voters via federal forms. So it's not just that the states aren't doing an adequate job of verifying citizenship as a condition precedent to registering to a vote in a federal election. They're prohibited by law from doing so. An increasing number of localities permit non-citizens to vote in local elections. And this makes it even worse. It further blurs the distinctions that have historically been meant to protect the integrity of our elections. Prominent Democrats have openly discussed these tactics, in many instances, as beneficial to their agenda, as likely to help their political ambitions. Only months ago, every Senate Democrat voted to count illegal aliens in the census to help them shore up more seats in Congress and consequently more votes in the Electoral College. This cannot continue. It's our responsibility, our imperative, to close these gates. My bill, the SAVE Act, would ensure that this stops, because it would be a vital step in securing the electoral process, ensuring that every vote cast is legitimate and every voter is duly recognized and registered and properly brought into the system so that they can vote. The SAVE Act amends the National Voter Registration Act. the same act that was interpreted a few years ago by the Supreme Court as prohibiting the states from requesting any positive proof of citizenship, so that states could ensure that only U.S. citizens may participate in federal elections. It fixes the NVRA. If the NVRA was interpreted that way, this would close that loophole. The SAVE Act requires states to obtain concrete documentary proof of citizenship at the time of voter registration. It specifies acceptable documentation and requires states to establish alternatives, alternative verification processes for those rare instances in which standard documents might be unavailable. Furthermore, the SAVE Act compels states to proactively remove non-citizens from voter rolls and introduces severe federal penalties for those who intentionally register non-citizens. This bill echoes the sentiments of the American people from coast to coast. It transcends political affiliations with an overwhelming bipartisan supermajority of Americans supporting it. And it speaks directly to the core of what makes our country great: fair, free, and secure elections operating within our constitutional republic. This is about protecting our elections from foreign interference, something my Democratic colleagues claim to care about and long have. If we truly want our elections to be free of foreign interference, then by all means pass the SAVE Act. Let's pass it today. Let's pass it right now. So for those of my colleagues who are opposed to this, why aren't they concerned with the ability of tens of millions of foreign nationals, non-citizens in the United States, to vote in America? Why should we allow tens of millions of foreign nationals who are not citizens of the United States to vote in U.S. elections? Now, if the Biden administration insists on keeping America's border open, as to my great dismay, it has, for the entirety of the 3.5 years or so Biden's been in office, they're going to insist on keeping the borders open, then by all means, they must, at least at a bare minimum, ensure that none of those non-citizens are interfering in our elections. Every single day that we delay, the foundation of our electoral process erodes a little more. We cannot wait for this administration to enforce the law, to enforce the border, which they haven't done. They continue to refuse to do it. More people continue to enter. But in the meantime, they've let in 10 million illegal aliens. You add that to those who are already here, an estimated 30 million non-citizens currently reside in the United States. But this administration just keeps right on trucking, not doing anything about this problem. And in fact, this administration strongly opposes this legislation. Now, let's run through the reasoning. The reasoning is really telling. There are several arguments raised by the White House in the statement they issued just earlier this week. First, the White House protests, quote, "It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. It is a federal crime punishable by prison and fines," close quote. Now, to be clear, that is on its face a correct statement of the law. I won't disagree with the statement on its four corners, but the conclusion is really messed up. As I've already stated, there's absolutely no functioning mechanism for enforcing the law, and it's worse than that. It's not just that current law doesn't create an adequate enforcement mechanism. It's that current law, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, affirmatively prohibits the states from doing what they would need to do in order to prevent non-citizens from registering to vote and subsequently voting in federal elections, contrary to federal law. Meanwhile, DOJ investigations of illegal voting are all but non-existent. A law without enforcement cannot, will not stop illegal behavior. And there are many, many circumstances in which, notwithstanding the fact that the underlying conduct is criminally prohibited, you still need some sort of verification mechanism to make it enforceable. By the White House's own logic, it'd be unnecessary and perhaps even unwise to have laws requiring a photo ID to buy beer and cigarettes. You know, we've got these laws on the books, after all, that already make it a crime to sell beer and cigarettes to children. So according to the White House's logic, we shouldn't need an additional law requiring age verification with a photo ID. Now, nobody would be that crazy, that insane to make that argument there. We shouldn't be making it here. It's the same argument, the exact same argument. Next, in second position, the administration makes the unsubstantiated claim that, quote, the justification for the SAVE Act is based on easily disproven falsehoods, close quote, end of sentence. But then, well, the administration utterly fails, defiantly refuses to offer anything to support that statement. It's ironic because that justification for opposing it, on grounds that the justification for the SAVE Act is based on disproven falsehoods, this is its own disproven falsehood. There's nothing there. There's no falsehood that's been disproven. They have not disproven the fact that non-citizens, whether legally or illegally in this country at the time, can easily obtain a voter registration, eligibility to vote in federal elections, or the physical ability to do it, rather, so long as they're willing to check a box and sign their name. They don't dispute the fact that in all 50 states and D.C., a non-citizen can apply for and receive a driver's license, or that the National Voter Registration Act makes it easy when applying for a driver's license to check a box and sign your name and thereby register to vote in federal elections. When you add to that the fact that states are affirmatively legally prohibited based on the Supreme Court's interpretation of the NVRA a few years ago, saying that the states cannot, may not, must not ask for any kind of documentation to verify citizenship, we've got a problem. So for them to say that our justification for the SAVE Act is based on falsehoods, on easily disproven falsehoods, is itself easily disproven, and it's a falsehood. Third, the administration asserts that, quote, making a false claim of citizenship or unlawfully voting in an election is punishable by removal from the United States and a permanent bar to admission, close quote. Well, this is an interesting argument. This one is rich, Mr. President, coming from this administration. Look, well, it's true that the naturalization form has a self-reporting mechanism that asks the applicant if the applicant has ever voted illegally. Yeah, that's true. As far as I can tell, even when they do self-report, in those, I suspect, rare instances where they do, absolutely nothing has been done with that information under the Biden administration. Joe Biden isn't deporting anyone for illegally voting. Joe Biden has opened the floodgates and just lets people come in. So that's rich coming from this administration, suggesting that there's going to be suddenly rigorous enforcement of laws governing our border security. In this instance, when, number one, they're not doing it, and number two, everywhere you look, they're doing the opposite of that. Fourth, the administration asserts, quote, states already have effective safeguards in place to verify voters' eligibility and maintain the accuracy of voter rolls. Mr. President, that assertion is simply flat out wrong. It's just false. It's false factually, and it's false legally, meaning it is not true and it cannot be true by operation of law for reasons I've just explained. States are legally prohibited from requiring proof of citizenship when registering voters for federal elections. This, I fear, may well be a feature, not a bug, for the administration, and a reason for the administration to oppose it, tragically. We'll get back to that more in a moment. But look, this loophole that I'm describing, based on the Supreme Court's interpretation of the NVRA, telling states that they may not and must not ask for any kind of evidence of citizenship, that's a gaping loophole that we must fix. Lastly, the administration claims that instead of safeguarding our elections, this bill, with its incredibly generous list of ways to demonstrate citizenship, would make it harder for Americans to vote. Well, look, the reality is that there's an expansive list of ways to demonstrate citizenship, even if you lack the documentation traditionally involved in proving it. And keep in mind, it's not unusual for Americans to be asked for proof of citizenship. Every single time an American citizen starts new employment, starts a new job, and they fill out an I-9, they've got to provide proof of citizenship. And if you're not a citizen, you've got to show evidence of your visa and your eligibility to work in the United States under that visa. If you can't do that, you can't start a job. This happens all the time. This is not as if the ability to prove citizenship and a requirement that one do so is foreign to us. Nor is it the case under this bill that it would be exceptionally difficult, because even if you're one of those rare individuals who, for whatever reason, doesn't have or have access to a birth certificate or something else that could prove it, we've got a long list of other ways that you can do it, even if you lack the traditionally utilized documentation. This bill allows all American citizens to vote. More importantly, if enacted, it would mean that no American vote could be canceled out by a vote cast illegally by a non-citizen. This bill would make it harder to cheat in elections and ensure the integrity of every ballot lawfully cast. There is no valid argument against the SAFE Act, Mr. President. None. The only reason to oppose this bill would exist if you needed illegal votes to win elections. Full stop, that's it. By passing the SAVE Act, we would send a clear message that in the United States of America, voting is not just a privilege of citizenship, but a cherished and protected right. As debates about election integrity rage, the SAVE Act stands out by guaranteeing that only American citizens can have a say in our elections. American elections must be decided by American voters. Full stop. And so, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 8281, which is at the desk. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Now, one of the main reasons that the Biden administration has come out and already released a statement, which I will post in the description of this video if you'd like to read it for yourself, is because they claim that it is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. And while that is true on its face, as the great senator from the state of Utah pointed out, the problem lies in the Voter Registration Act of 1993. See, this act prohibits states from requiring that someone prove that they are a citizen before they're eligible to vote. All they have to do is be on a form and check that they are a citizen, and that's it. This is disgraceful, and it's disgraceful that this wasn't addressed long before 1993. It makes me wonder how many elections before or since 1993 have really been fair elections. It is disgraceful to me, my friends, that only 5 Democrats in the House sided with Republicans to pass this issue. And mark my words, I would be surprised if it even passes the Senate, because Democrats, I am sure, will fight tooth and nail to keep it from even being passed. But even if it does pass the Senate today, you already know that the Biden administration will veto it. They've promised to do so, as I said. So it will have to go back to the House, and both the House of Representatives and the Senate will have to vote on it again and have a 2/3 majority in both houses for it to pass. This is disgraceful. And if nothing else, my friends, this proves that Democrats don't care about preserving American interest. And I have issues with Republicans. I have many issues. But this is something that I agree with them on. This should not be a partisan issue. This should be an American issue. If you really cared about preserving election integrity, like you've griped about for years, this should be a no-brainer. This should be common sense legislation that should have been passed a long, long time ago, long before I was born. And this will show you who really cares about the country and the interest of this country. Those who vote against this are flipping the bird to the American people. And you should take note of this in November, because there is no way that these people should be allowed to be in public office ever again. I would say that they deserve to be tried for treason if they vote against this, because they are purposefully voting against American interest and voting against our election integrity being preserved. They are voting against the very fabric of this country. And the American people, I of which am one of the loudest voices on this, I'm sure, just an average American like you, am sick of this. I am sick of not being able to feel like that my vote makes a damn bit of difference one way or another. And this act must pass if we want to restore faith in our election system once again. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Help me get this message out, because this is a very important issue that deserves to be talked about, and every American citizen needs to see this today.